item on our agenda, which is the consideration of the draft report of Mrs. Maria Carvalho on the Union's protection against market manipulation in the wholesale energy market, the REMIT report, which is part of the broader package to reform the EU electricity market. We have 45 minutes approximately for this debate, and we will start with our rapporteur, Mrs. Carvalho. I kindly ask her to present her report.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, the regulation on wholesale energy market integrity and transparency, the REMIT, aims to prevent and fight malpractices such as insider trading and market manipulation. Therefore, it's a very important legal instrument to ensure transparency, competitiveness, and stability of the EU energy market. My report, or the proposed amendments are based on three principles. First, legal coherence and transparency. Second, strengthening the European dimension. And third, reinforcing the market. To each of these principles correspond a specific set of actions or amendments. So let's start with the legal coherence and transparency that will enable more clarity in the regulation and a better alignment with existing legislation. Examples of specific actions or amendments, including in this legal coherence and transparency part of the report, is, for example, better alignment of the definitions to specificities of the energy markets to avoid confusion, overlap, double reporting, and excessive administrative burden. We also have included all the relevant actors in the definition of market participants, but at the same time avoiding putting excessive burden on smaller players. We have better framed the roles of inside information platforms and registered reporting mechanisms. For example, we have included in the REMIT the LNG-related articles imported from the Council regulation on the enhanced solidarity and the coordination of gas purchases. Like this, we have as a full co-decision regulation this part that was only in the Council regulation. Second principle on the strengthening of the European dimension. On that, we have reinforced ACER powers, namely by modifying the criteria for identifying cross-border cases that can be investigated by ACER. And like this, we are enhancing his investigating capabilities. However, we are keeping a balance between the European responsibilities and the national regulatory authorities' role. For example, we decide to respect the national authorities' primary role in the enforcement part, so in the enforcement phase. We enhance the exchange of information between energy and financial authorities, make sure that the monitoring is effective and there is not double report. If the market player has already reported to an authority, doesn't need to do it again to the energy part. Last principle is the reinforcement of the market. We have amendments to avoid excessive administrative work and reduce red tape for market participants. We make sure that there are adequate access to the markets is granted also to third country players. So we have removed some of the barriers that were including in the Commission proposal to third country players in order to increase the market and the liquidity of the market. And we make sure that the investments are safeguarded by ensuring that the information regarding the investment process shall be disclosed only when is strictly necessary. On the final note, we have introduced an amendment calling for the European Commission to conduct an assessment of the regulation no later than June 27, paying special attention to the impacts on the market behavior, market participants, liquidity, reporting requirements, and the level of administrative burden for market participants. We feel that it will be important to have this assessment, as we are doing a very fast-tracking procedure, even if legally it's not like that, in a very complex dossier. So we really need to make sure that we analyze in few years the impact of this regulation. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the opinions of our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Carvalho. We go now to the shadows, 2 minutes for each intervention, and I start with SND and Mrs. Toia.
Grazie Presidente, ringrazio anch'io.
Thank you, Chairman, and I would also like to thank our colleague Carvalho. I'll work with her. She's already put forward some of her proposals, and I agree with their thrust. Very briefly, I don't have much time to go into my proposals, but I'd like to pick up on some points and explain the approach I will bring to the examination of these provisions. I believe that what we've seen happening over these last years has shown that the current rules on vigilance and control of the gas market has left some real weak points, and we really need to strengthen our ability to keep an eye on what's happening, and also to work against insider trading, which is market abuse, basically. So, yes, we have to strengthen ASA, and I would... we've seen cases where countries haven't reacted, or smaller countries haven't been able to intervene when there's been cross-border issues. So we need to strengthen on that front. But let me stress 2 aspects to our colleague as well. Firstly, the question of the subjects operating in the market who are not purchasers or sellers. They're not involved in supply contracts for gas or other forms of energy, but these are financial bodies selling financial products which are strictly linked to the trading of energy through derivatives, etc. So we have to define who's working individually, brokers, for example. I think that we have to be very careful about this, and we have to understand that it's not enough simply to provide information when there are suspect operations, but it has to be quite clear that their action in supporting negotiations and billing should be monitored, because we may recognize a risk of manipulation or manipulation activities. It's good, as you've mentioned, that there should be reference to ASA for them as well, but ASA should also coordinate with certain aspects of ESMA. So I'm less worried about the fact that these bodies have to refer to 2 authorities. We can simplify that. We should make sure that the 2 authorities work together, but we certainly shouldn't water down our vigilance. Final comment. I haven't really understood. You've been talking about removing actions for extra EU, for example, but why don't we maintain the Commission proposal for the extra EU subjects for people who are involved in negotiations with people within the EU, that they should have some headquarters, some base in Europe, so that they can be identified should there be any violation. I wouldn't water down the role of the extra EU subjects, but I would kind of try and cover that with certain provisions along the lines of a proposal made by our colleague. Thank you.
Gamon, Mr. Peterson, on behalf of Renew.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the rapporteur for this draft report, which is a good basis for the discussions. Thanks for this. Our shadow is welcoming a number of your proposals and clarifications, which improves the proposal already quite a lot. When it comes to Article 13 and the investigation and enforcement of breaches of the rules, we see already good amendments in the draft report, and our shadow believes that it is long overdue to update the existing rules in this regard. So she welcomes that ASA now has the possibility to exercise its powers when certain criteria have been met. After all, it must be our common goal to prevent market abuse as much as possible. And our shadow doesn't share the concerns raised by some that stronger enforcement through ACER would lead to countless and extensive investigations of national cases. There are already clear rules in the Commission proposal as to when ACER can initiate an investigation. However, she believes that some clarification of when ACER can or should start an investigation can still be done. Our shadow also reckons that effective enforcement of the rules is needed both at national and European level, and she therefore welcomes the proposal to harmonize sanctions on a national level. But effective enforcement also means that there should be possibility for sanctions by ACER in case of specific cross-border cases. Our shadow believes further that if an investigation clearly concludes that there is a case of manipulation, it must be followed up and ACER shall be able to issue a fine. Our shadow would also like to discuss the possibility of criminal sanctions on national level if there are very serious or intentional cases of breaches of the rules as is already exist in the financial market abuse legislation. Specifically on RRMs and IIPs, it's important to underline that these are very important tools to increase transparency. Therefore, revoking their authorization to sanction false statements or infringements shall only be the last resort. And our shadow believes that we should also consider to give ACER the possibility to initiate steps before revoking the authorization, such as warnings, fines, or public notice. So, these are some major points which will be reflected in our shadow's amendments, and she is looking very much forward to working with you, Madam Rapporteur, and the shadow rapporteurs. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Dalunde, the shadow of the Greens.
Thank you, Chair. Dear Rapporteur, dear colleagues, the European Court of Auditors, in its special report this year, concluded that 10 years after it came into force, the REMIT regulation has not yet fully delivered on its potential to prevent market abuse in the wholesale electricity market. Our citizens and our businesses cannot wait another 10 years for us to fix the problem. We have to act now and agree on fundamental changes that are needed in order to have a proper oversight of the market. The draft report by Mrs. Carvalho is a step in the right direction, but in our opinion, we need to go much further. In addition to granting investigating powers to ACER in cross-border cases, we also need to disallow national regulatory authorities or member states to prevent an investigation from taking place. And it is also essential to grant ACER sanctioning powers. This important provision is absent in the Commission's proposal as well as in the draft report. And this is a major shortcoming in the system. It leaves a jurisdiction gap, as it is very difficult to agree or define which national authority should sanction a market abuser in a cross-border case. For this reason, only 8% of cross-border files are finalized. And we are going to have to close this gap. Another important proposal from our side is designed to make sure that ACER has the power to issue binding guidance vis-à-vis market participants. And last but not least, an understaffed ACER, which is currently the case. This is good news for market manipulators and bad news for citizens, who, due to these manipulations, will have to pay higher energy bills. And these are some of the important issues that we as Greens will have to fight for in this upcoming process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Krasnodevsky from ECR. For ECR, from ECR.
Okay, thank you very much. I must say that I am different opinions many of colleagues. So first of all, I do not think that the REMIT revision is maybe it's important, but it is not so urgent and should be actually detached from EMD revision. And I think that we need as a proper assessment, impact assessment. Unfortunately, this is more and more custom that we are going with a new proposal and new legislative work without this impact assessment. And Concerning the report, I would say it's going good to the direction, addressing some of the many shortcomings of the original proposal. Yeah, for instance, positive removal of potential deliveries from the definition of the wholesale energy product, the adjusted definition of in many points, significant improvement on the definition of the inside information, and the process of the deregistration of IRPs is clarified, and also responsibilities of OMPs are clarified. But what I see in this more general, the fundamental problem, this is unjustified expansion of the power of ECR, of ACER. I think that the extension of the power of ECR would be very positive, but ACER, I must say, is not a good direction. So you can reconsider this, colleagues, during work on this file. Yeah. But so why actually we should give the ACER this instinctive power? Yeah. So there's I think general tendency that we would like to limit because we do not trust national authorities. I think it is not the right direction. And also, if we look in the past, also some agency decision lacked balance, transparency, and so and they preferred also certain big players. So I think that we should work on this, and we should also reconsider this main problem in this proposal by the Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. Mr. Borchia, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mrs. Carvalho. Our amendments will especially address Article 13, which deals with the issue of governance. The article provides indeed significant powers for ACER when it comes to inspections. What the rapporteur is proposing might make more complex what the Commission has already proposed, especially in the case of cross-border issues. More specifically, while it is true that there are some cases of jurisdictional gaps when it comes to cross-border issues, on the other hand, these cases represent a tiny portion of the total picture, no more than 4%. Instead, the Commission's proposal intends to expand to all cross-border cases without a real need. This will result into an activation of ACER's intervention in absence of a well-defined legal framework, and even when national authorities have already initiated inspections. It is likely, therefore, that the legal frameworks will overlap and functions will be duplicated only to respond to a need that in reality is extremely small. Instead, it will be more appropriate to defer ACER's power to request action to national authorities when they actually find the need. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Madame Mesure. La gauche.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Mrs. Carvalho for having presented her report. Basically, we don't have any major points of divergence with the rapporteur, more transparency, moving in the right direction with this report, but we would like a more binding framework for all market players. Our priority, of course, is to avoid speculation and market abuse, and several of you have already mentioned this, but you've got the question of sanctions. That's one main line, dissuasive ones. And we will also have some amendments which will aim at better distribution between the role of ACER and the national regulatory authorities. I think one of my colleagues has also already mentioned the impact study, and I'd like to thank the rapporteur for having mentioned this too. Within the framework of the reform of the electricity market, the Commission did not conduct an impact evaluation. And we've seen from our different discussions with national regulators that they're all alerting us to the feasibility of what's before us. And feasibility obviously involves what means we have to have a genuine impact study for what we're proposing. So I hope we will have the means to be able to move in that direction, that ACER will have the financial and human means as well to have real power of inquiry and really conduct these inquiries, and also sanctions for market operators, of course, who would undermine the established rules. So in a nutshell, this is a report which is moving in the right direction. We would, however, call for greater ambition. Of course, we also understand that the core of the matter will come through the reform of the electricity market, which will be addressed in a second stage. But I'd like, as of now, to thank the rapporteur for this report. Thank you.
The second round, which is comprised by interventions of ITRE colleagues, shorter interventions than the shadows, please. And I start with Mr. Ehler. No. Mr. Nica.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte. Mulțumesc, doamna Carvalho, pentru raport, dar...
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and thank you to Mrs. Carvalho for her report. Colleagues, a year ago, when discussions about energy prices and electricity began, we were basing ourselves on a situation of fact. People were unhappy because they were facing absolutely enormous bills. The operators, well, I mean, we saw what happened in many cases. It was because there was no correlation between production prices and sales prices for energy or import prices. We've had all of these situations highlighted. Prices went up 10, 15-fold over normal real prices. And huge profits have been made, and that triggered inflation. We ended up as well with totally unjustified prices, justified only through the need for profit. So we need to give out a clear signal in the EU. We will help and support investment, but with one single condition, and that is that the rules of the game have to be respected. Profit margins, right now we're talking about 10 to 12%, and if all players understand that that's feasible or reasonable for everyone, then fine. I agree with what we've heard, that we really have to be firm this time round. We have to be clear. But we have to create an impact. We can't allow certain economic issues or economic operators to lose out. ESRA has lost some of its credibility. They're not able to play their role. We need clear, immediate sanctions. Everything has to be clear. We should be able to foresee what's going to happen. We need predictability, because if the rules of the game are not respected in the EU, people will be punished, and punished hard. Because otherwise, people who are tempted by speculation will be encouraged to do that. That's the position of our group. Thank you.
President Buzek, please. Mr. Buzek, please, it's your turn.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Carvalho, for your report, Maria. It was a short period of time, and you prepared it. And it's quite a technical legislative dossier, so it was not very easy. But it's a key for protecting EU consumers. I mean, our citizens, industry, SMEs, against any market abuse. So it's a very important report. And two short remarks. I welcome the rapporteur proposal that ACER's investigation powers shall be exercised in close and active cooperation with the relevant competent authorities in our member states. It's very important. And second, maybe it is also worth addressing in our report the issue of inside information fees, because we should avoid mixing costs for data collection and investigation costs. Sometimes it could be mixed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Mrs. Paulus, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for this very important debate. I think what we have all to keep in mind that we have with ACER, of course, a very effective committee with a lot of knowledge and a lot of, let's say, also innovative ideas on how to best implement our electricity market. And I think what we all should do is, first of all, talk to our budget people, because what I constantly hear from Mr. Zinglesen, that they actually need more manpower, that they need more resources, but that they are being denied the necessary means when it comes to the budgetary negotiations. So I would invite everyone, when we're negotiating on the next budget, to talk to your budget people to support the respective amendments to the Parliament's approach to the EU budget, so that this agency can function in a way that is best for all citizens. Everything else has been already said. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Heisel, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Maria, for the report. I think it's really workload to be done in very short time. But let me be clear, I think that the increasing profits by manipulating the market during an energy crisis is intolerable. And I think also the colleagues already said, I think that there are many examples of market abuses which caused totally unjustified prices, and we, as members of the European Parliament, we have to do something. It's really intolerable that there is still the practice like lying about the amount at which a deal occurred to drive prices up, or inventing bids or calls for electricity to enhance artificially the demand, or trade between entities owned by the same individual to create the illusion that the market is moving in favor of sellers. I think we have to really finish with, and it's why we have to strengthen the role of the European regulator, ACER, in the European. It is really European solution to market manipulation. I agree that we have to. It should be also coordinated with ESMA, and but ACER as like a real investigator. It needs also to be able to do on-site inspections and to have the ability to do statements. Also to allow, I would say, to disallow in very, I would say, very important cases of abuses and infringement, to disallow national authorities to really prevent doing the investigations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Virkunen, please. No? Then Mia Petra. Mrs. Kumpula-Natri, please.
Thank you. A lot has been said, and I also wanted to enhance the idea that once we are having European energy markets, we need cross-border investigation possibilities and powers. This is new, and we have to not lag behind on that one. The figures by the Green Shadow was, I think, very describing that we are not delivering yet there, and then we are still building the future on this part as well. Something happened similar for the free flow of money. It was first deliberalized and only after the control and monitor. So why to do that on energy market is not good. Resources for both NRS and ACER are very important. But also, I wanted to thank the rapporteur. It's a long list of the entities and persons you have been meeting. Maybe also meet with ESMA, because on the markets there are a lot, on energy markets there are a lot of tools that do not actually own the energy. They don't produce the energy. They don't have responsibility of the balancing powers or anything. They are purely market tools, like financing tools. So how to integrate that observation, and Toija was elaborating that one. I think it can improve this one. The companies, of course, are worried of the double reporting, but we are worried that the companies and the speculators do have too much power, and we are not investigating and seeing that one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No other intervention from colleagues. We go to European Commission. We have our director here, Mrs. Sico Magni. Please, if you'd like to make some short considerations on the proposal of Mrs. Carvalho, and if you identify any question for the Commission, we use this opportunity also maybe to clarify some aspects from the colleagues' interventions. You have the floor. Thank you for being here.
Many thanks, President Buzoi, Rapporteur, Shadows, honorary members. I would first like to thank the Rapporteur, Mrs. Carvalho, and her team for their hard work on the report on the remit and the very positive engagement. So we indeed have proposed remit review together with the market design to better protect consumers from market abuse by increasing transparency, monitoring capabilities of Member States and ACER, and ensuring more effective investigation for cross-border cases. So I believe that thanks to the reform, consumers and companies in the EU will be better protected against any possible future price shocks, and the market and investment incentives will be there for renewable energy deployment that we need in order to achieve our climate targets. As regards the draft report, it maintains overall the objectives and key measures of the Commission proposal. It contains a number of positive developments, in particular regarding the definitions such as organised marketplace, market participant, or new definition of order books. I'm also glad to see that the draft report maintains new important role of ACER for investigation of cross-border cases, and in some instances even strengthens the role of ACER by, for instance, extending criteria or giving the agency powers to take statements in the course of investigation. I take note of the comments that were made on ACER and regulators' resources. So indeed, we look forward to those negotiations later on the budget questions. In any case, effective enforcement of cross-border cases is crucial, as they have an impact on various jurisdictions and sometimes also on the whole EU due to the market integration that we have in place. In this context, we welcome the support for the LNG benchmark in the draft report. Once again, we are fully aligned in ensuring transparency and an adequate monitoring of the market. It's very important. We would have a few more technical comments to discuss, but we are happy to take those bilaterally with the rapporteur and with the shadows and with all the honorary members to make sure that the report is in line with what the Parliament wishes it to be. I think we do believe that it is very urgent to get remit right, and in order to make sure that it accompanies our further market integration that will come and that will be needed for securing our energy system and best prices to consumers. I leave it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Director. I go back to our rapporteur. If you'd like to reply to the colleagues' suggestions and questions, please.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting discussion, and we have mainly 2 points of debate. One is the power of ACER and the European responsibility in the energy market, and the national responsibility of the national authorities. Of course, we have increased the powers at European level, increasing the number of cases with ACER will investigate, so reducing the criteria on the cross-border cases. But we have left the enforcement to the national authorities. Some of the colleagues think that we went too far. Some of the colleagues want a more ambitious proposal. So that is going to be an area of debate that is a crucial debate, political debate of the how Europe will evolve, not only on energy. The second point of debate, and that were slightly different, opinions, is what we require to market players from third countries. Are we going to require that they have a full office and they are established in Europe, or we have a more open attitude to the third countries and to attract players to have a bigger market and more liquidity? That is going to be, again, a very important debate. There are different opinions, and we hope to find in our shadows meetings a common understanding of these two that are, for me, the two crucial, very political points that we have to discuss among the shadows and the colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Carvalho. I would like to remind you, dear colleagues, that the deadline for tabling amendments is tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then, of course, our rapporteur, together with the shadows, will build the compromises, the voting list, and the final, taking into account also the input from other committees. As I said at the beginning, this morning to the coordinators meeting is not clear yet what was the final decision of COP, but clearly we'll take into account also what other committees, the budget committee, will propose. So tomorrow the deadline for amendments. Thank you so much, colleagues. We go to the next item, which is the draft report of Mr. González Casares on the electricity market design. We have also 45 minutes for this report, and we start, of course, with the rapporteur. Please, Mr. González Casares, you have the floor.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thanks to all the members of the group, the shadow rapporteurs, the Commission. What is involved here? Increase electrification, make headway in the area of renewables, and become independent in energy crisis. That's one of our weak points in this whole business. There's been a hike in the prices of electricity as a consequence of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This has brought about social upheaval and tremendous distrust in the benefits to be derived from electricity. So we need, obviously, to make sure that the electricity market is tailored to the new ambitions we have, the new objectives we have. This is what I have tried to do with the amendments at hand. My proposal is this. First of all, protect consumers. That's how we should start. Reinforce the rights and guarantee the rights of the consumers, particularly those most vulnerable and who are tremendously energy dependent. Inter alia, what we need to do here is to make sure that we have an obligation on the member states to forbid the disconnection of vulnerable energy consumers, particularly those who are energy poor, and guarantee citizens' rights to receive electricity supply. I share the Commission's proposal that we should boost renewables through contracts for difference and PPAs. However, as regards the contracts for difference, it's necessary for the distribution of the income obtained to give priority to those consumers who need it most. And this is a way of also of increasing energy efficiency and a just production, also to make sure that we reflect the various circumstances on the market. On PPAs, what we need is better access to this private financing of electricity generation so as to provide long-term stability. So we should facilitate the coming into the business of small generators through PPAs that are established on a voluntary basis. We should have also a PPA platform, actually. Now, as regards flexibility, for an efficient integration of renewables in the electricity system, we must adopt measures to provide flexibility as a response to storage needs and to demand. So we need to have an active management of demand and storage to make sure that we have a minimum European threshold that is respected here. What are the tools at our disposal here? I believe that the Commission has made this reform because there's a crisis in the wake of which we have seen tremendous upheavals. ASA has said so and had said that we were not ready for this type of crisis. We've had to develop a number of emergency measures. The Commission said we need to declare an energy crisis situation. It's important. We must do this. However, this proposal doesn't solve everything, doesn't solve the financing issues. Every state has got to do it by itself. So what I would suggest in extraordinary measures is the temporal limitation of this windfall profits. This is recommended also by the International Energy Agency in its 10-point plan to face the crisis. This is an instrument that would apply only in case of a price crisis. It should be made quite clear that if in a price crisis the wholesale markets can go beyond 180 megawatts per hour, that's got to be made abundantly clear. We're talking about a price crisis, and therefore these are measures to be implemented for all member states, for all citizens and all companies involved. And it's not true that this would mean not financing renewables. No, 180 megawatts hour. Only reaching that cap when there's a price crisis, only then would we be able to reflect exactly what's going on in the market. And another important issue, this cap is only to be directed at the wholesale energy and it does not affect the PPAs or the contracts for difference. So let's keep that in mind. Another thing, excluding windfall profits for biomass, coal, or even residues, because we've been told that this is also only for renewables. No, it's for all these I have mentioned. Thank you very much indeed.
So much. We go now to the shadows, and on behalf of EPP, Mrs. Carvalho, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, the rapporteur, Mrs. Casares. I will divide my presentation into parts. First, what elements, some of elements that I appreciate and I like in the report. And the second, what I like less or I dislike. So first, I'm quite in line with, for example, what Mr. Casares has put to strengthen the cooperation of member states to accelerate the procedures in order to have at least a minimum of 15% electricity interconnection target. We have this target since some years and it's still very, very far away, and it's very important to have a strong internal energy market. However, in this point, I go a bit further in my amendments that I intend to place today, including a framework for investment on grids. It's very important to find a strong framework for investment in grids, both in transmission and distribution. And we have including anticipatory investments, network tariffs to provide the right incentives to system operators to invest in grids developments. Also the part of digitalization, and it's important. And I stress also the fact that we need to look at specific situations like islands and the outmost regions that have specific problems on grids. Second, I share many of the proposals of the rapporteurs on the consumer protection, on the empower of consumers. However, in the amendments I go a bit further in order, for example, to enhance the opportunities to share energy, and I include measures that facilitate the energy sharing for all those facilities with a suitable rooftop by increasing the threshold to 10 megawatts, so to include more participants than the proposal of the rapporteur. Finally, I would like to stress a point that I completely disagree on the approach of the cap on revenues that Mr. Casari is proposing, and I'm against to include it in this regulation, as it is already proved to be detrimental to the internal market, and it increases uncertainty for the investors. And so it should not be a structural measure, neither in times of crisis. So we also have reduced the criteria for declaring a crisis, so to avoid that we live in a permanent crisis. So this is the part that we probably have more debate during the shadows meeting, and I look forward to positive cooperation with the rapporteur and my colleagues, the shadows. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Carvalho. From Renew, Mr. Peterson.
Thanks so much, Chair. And first of all, thanks so much to the rapporteur for all his hard work on this extremely important file. I think we all get a sense of these days and weeks how sensitive this is, and how careful we need to be in order to ensure that we get this right, in order to ensure stability and predictability in the markets. Now, in general, a couple of general questions. We will, from Renew's side, emphasize the points on stability and the need for predictability. Sorry, it's difficult to pronounce. In order to ensure that investors that are ready out there to deploy funds to ramp up deployment of renewables, that they can do so speedily and in a assured way, that we are not going to fundamentally change the conditions for them to invest in. So our approach will be, to a large extent, market-driven. We will also emphasize the need for having a look at what we already agreed upon previously in the clean energy package, with the 70% rule, cross-border energy exchanges, the 15% interconnectors, as Ms. Carvalho alluded to, are all important points to bear in mind when negotiating this. And we will try not to be too prescriptive in our approach in the upcoming negotiations. Now, we all know that the devil will be in the detail in this hugely complex file. So when we get into the specifics, we will negotiate on the composition of CFDs and how they will be applied specifically. There'll be issues on the peak shaving proposal that we will be critical towards. We will have to further discuss the virtual hubs. We will be in favor of the tax. But then I think it's fair to say that the discussion on the inframarginal revenue cap will be a big discussion, given what's on the table. And we will be critical in order to not make this permanent. So this is for sure a very big discussion that we will be having. So all in all, very much looking forward to working with the rapporteur and the colleagues, the other shadows on this extremely important file. I think it's important that we negotiate very seriously, because the devil is going to be in the detail, and we need to ensure that we have a stable framework for the investors to navigate in. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bloss from the Greens.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nico, for your report. And I'm also really looking forward to this debate. I think it will be really one of the decisive files what we are discussing in the Parliament for the future of the renewables, also the future of being able to fight the climate crisis. And the first thing I think it's important to understand that what we saw last year is mainly a fossil price crisis. So the prices were driven up by high gas prices, and the best thing to lower prices is having as much renewables as possible, and that should be the first priority of this file. So in this regard, I think we also have been tricked a little bit by the Council when we negotiated on the Renewable Energy Directive. We said 45%, and we give you the repower money. We gave them the repower money, but they only agreed to 52.5%, so we have to close this gap. And here, I think we should think about a European level scheme, that also the European level can back with PPAs the deployment of renewables. That's important. I also believe that we must be very careful to put renewables under a lot of conditions which are not for others, like the fossil producers. So in the crisis mechanism, we have to really make sure that it's then for all and it's not a permanent crisis. Secondly, it's important that renewables are not, nuclear is not a renewable source. It's actually very different if you have a centralized system or a decentralized system. And I don't think that we let nuclear is even in the treaties of the European Union, so we have to really take it out. Thirdly, we really need to work for citizens. So that means making the bills less expensive by renewable energy, but also everyone should have the right to energy. Everyone should have the right to be connected to the electricity grid. But also, of course, it means being part of the system, being able to produce and to store energy, to provide it to the system, being part of the flexibility. This is what we are going to table. And in German, ein ganz wichtiger Punkt.
One important point. If it's just as simple as plugging in a fridge, then it's really going to be much easier to get consumers on board, and I'll be tabling an amendment along those lines.
I also would like to thank you, Mr. González Casares, for this work, and I think that this draft report has many important positive points. First of all, the capacity mechanism. I'm very glad to see that rapporteur recognized the importance of capacity mechanism, and I think the capacity mechanism should be considered as a structural element of national markets and not only as a last resort measure. And here I can say also that we can go probably more further than proposed by the rapporteur. The other important, I think, positive changes proposed by the rapporteurs is the way in which this direction he proposed to use the congestion income and virtual hubs. I also think that loosening criteria used to declare an emergency situation at the EU level is also can be assessed positively. However, I believe that it should be Council that should declare this emergency state, not the Commission. And this criteria should be indicative from the Council. But there are also some points which raise my concerns. For instance, mentioned already PPAs that should not only be limited to renewables. It makes no sense to distinguish between fossil-free technologies from PPAs. Then there's the questions of the CFD. I think that should be not priority. They should become also voluntary tool. And we shouldn't forget that there is a state aid mechanism and a sort of public intervention, so that it would be not actually the core element of internal market. Concerning the national targets for flexibility, they should remain indicative, and I am not in favor to have a separate national objective for demand response and energy storage. And in general, I would say that the problem is when I make in the general that we have to find a proper balance between the possibility to intervention in the market, but also the market mechanism. And we should avoid the inclination, that our economy, also in this energy sector, will be more and more planned economy, because we already had some negative experiences with this kind of economy in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Borchia, please.
Thanks again. Well, I will start focusing first on Article 15, which deals with the so-called gate closure. Both the Commission's and the Rapporteur's proposal risk to completely change the way TSO operate. There are already member states that operate with a 30 minutes time window, but this capacity depends on so many factors that vary at the national level. And all member states cannot be required to adjust to this reduction without first conducting a proper impact assessment and cost-benefit analysis. Reducing the time window from 1 hour to 30 minutes would de facto eliminate all balancing sources that have activation times greater than 20 minutes, presenting enormous risk to grid stability because it would reduce the time window for TSOs to determine balancing requirements and to be able to act accordingly. A second important issue is that of capacity mechanism with an already high and ever-increasing penetration of non-programmable renewables in the system, whose production is weather-dependent. It is imperative to find a way to continue to ensure the adequacy of the electricity system over time. Capacity mechanisms are therefore essential to ensure the continued operation of the non-programmable generation facilities that are strictly necessary for time adequacy. Therefore, capacity mechanisms must become structural elements of the market and no longer be considered as a solution to be used only as a last resort, as is currently the case. Regarding the regional virtual hubs and forward markets, this is a mechanism designed to overcome market fragmentation, but nevertheless, the proposal poses very large risks in terms of costs and uncertainties for TSOs and market participants without a proper impact assessment having been carried out. Therefore, we want to propose a different approach where TSOs can offer to send an assessment to ACER of the alternative options available within 18 months after the regulation comes into force. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Madame Mesure, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, for the report that you presented. There's some good elements in this report, even if in general terms we think it's a shame that there hasn't been recognition of market failure. Unlike what my colleague was just saying, our experience has been that liberalisation brought about by the European Union has undermined what previously worked very well, public planning of the energy sector. Now, Mr. Gonzalez has brought out in his report that he thinks there are some interesting things here, such as the maximum selling price for electricity producers. When you are in a crisis period, such as one we've been through, then even if 87 million people are in energy poverty, these are tools which are going to be abused to increase margins and revenues, which isn't decent. The second thing we think is interesting here is that the storage aspect. Obviously, we need to store renewable energy, and we're going to have to invest in innovative means of storage, and we need to get numbers on that. The third thing, which I think is interesting in the report, is the criteria for the crisis. They have been rather strict. They're going to be loosened now, and it's important when there's a crisis in an individual country that the country should itself be able to intervene to protect its own citizens from the effects of the energy crisis. The fourth point is the strengthening proposed by the rapporteur of the ban on disconnecting customers. We know that consumers, citizens are being disconnected, and any element that helps to put an end to these disconnections is something we would support. Finally, what we'd like to add, and this is perhaps it looks to a more ambitious version of the report, is to do with the CFDs. We want to make these compulsory when it comes to existing and future capacity, because this is a tool that helps better to circumscribe profits, and it's something that we desperately need. We'd also like to have regulated tariffs brought back in based on real production costs, and would propose a single supplier in member states who would be set up with tariff which would be equal to production costs and in line with production capacity. Final point is that we are not sure about this idea of having more and more PPAs, more private negotiators trying to negotiate capacity for production at the best possible tariff. Now, it would be good for some of them, we understand, but the idea is to promote the private sector even more in the energy market. Thank you very much.
Je vous remercie beaucoup for the second round, and I invite Mr. Eller to take the floor.
Today I start with something uncommon for me. I want to thank the Commission for their proposal, which is in principle a limited good one. However, there are three issues with the current proposal of the rapporteur where I would like to mention our concerns. First of all, the emergency price caps as proposed by the S&D rapporteur. This is the biggest red flag for the EPP. We want to secure a good investment case for renewable energy expansion. This proposal, from our point of view, will kill it, and we are very much against it. Secondly, the virtual hubs. The proposal will invent something that the market doesn't want without a proper ex-ante assessment. I highly doubt that their positive impact and fear negative consequences for the actual intention, more long-term contracts and stable price conditions. Thirdly, I think we all have to consider the question of the industrial electricity price. Currently, industry and companies need competitive electricity supply. This holds for the whole Europe and is acknowledged across party lines. And I think we have to have an idea what to do with that. I couldn't imagine implementing another long-lasting subsidy scheme for energy-intensive industry facing fierce competition into a regulation of the European Union. That doesn't do the trick from our point of view, but for a bridging time, for limited time, I think we have to find a solution. But this opens or shouldn't open the door for continued subsidizing of which the money question is not answered. Relying on the not even presented European Solidarity Fund is not good. That's the white elephant in the room, if you're honest. And secondly, it leaves out completely local SMEs, so the bakery around the corner isn't touched by any kind of solution to that. But I think in general terms, we all should try to pass that proposal in this term as early as possible. So I think we need to have a common compromise in the Parliament. The negotiations with the Council will be complicated enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Nica, please.
Mulțumesc, domnule președinte. În primul rând, de ce avem un nou electricity market?
Thank you. Let me start by saying this. Why do we need a new electricity market? Well, quite simply because the market that we have had so far is a clear example of market failure. And so I must thank the rapporteur for this report because we see in it so many good responses to the concerns we have had over the past few years. There are two things I should like to highlight here, and I would ask Mr. Nico and the other rapporteurs to listen to this attentively. Point number one, people at home, electricity consumers, or industries. We're talking about small or big companies or industries. Everybody needs electricity. And I think that our goal should be that on the European energy market, we should have 90% of stable contracts, stability in contracts. People should not have to depend on spot prices that could immediately entail an increase in the electricity bill. People can't live without knowing what they're going to have to be paying in the future. So these mechanisms are there in order to make sure that supply and demand are kept within a given margin. And so we're talking here about long-term and stability. I'm not going from hand to mouth, as it were. Point number two. People have been saying, oh, we must find a solution for those industries that are highly energy dependent and highly energy intensive. Yes, of course, we need a solution for them. Those industries who use a great deal of energy obviously need our assistance. And in past years, we've given 1 or 2 or 3 month solutions. But you can't work in the European economy on the basis of these short-term solutions, and particularly in the light of the Ukrainian consequences. Steel, we need steel. We have to produce it. We cannot just import anything and everything from China in the future. So we must hope that we will have a functional European industry, and for household consumption also, users have to be ensured that there is visibility and clarity on the European energy market. Thank you, Rapporteur, for your work.
Thank you so much, Chair. Dear colleagues, I want to remind you all why we are here. We had an extreme situation on the gas market, not the electricity market. This is a gas dependency that pushed electricity prices up high when 40% of the gas needed to be replaced. Now we're sitting here having an electricity market reform that has been done extremely fast, in record time, without thorough consultation, without already limited impact assessment, where the last reform, the last package that took 3 years of negotiating, is still not yet implemented in all of the member states. This is extraordinary, and we need to have that in mind and be very, very careful. That's our role here. So I urge you, colleagues, because this worries me, what I'm hearing, especially from the left side of this parliament. Be careful, listen to the experts. Don't fix what ain't broken. Listen to all of the experts guiding us, and please don't mess this up and do anything crazy, because we need to be careful when we're doing this with such a rush, such a short term, with such limited background information, limited assessment. We need to be responsible. If you want to fix one thing, fix the guarantees of origin scheme. That's my only wish and urge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No blue cards in the committee. Mrs. Paulus, please. Yes, Mr. Nica made a positive comment without microphone for the translation. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Nica. Mrs. Paulus, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And actually, I couldn't agree more with Emma, because what we're seeing is a sort of panicky reaction. And I'm really astonished that people are telling us the market didn't work. The market did exactly what markets are supposed to do. When there's a scarcity, prices go up. That's how markets work. And to blame the market on the scarcity is a bit unfair, because the scarcity did not come because of the market design. Had we had another market design, we still would have had the scarcity. We still would have had sky-high prices for gas, simply because there was no gas on the global market accessible for us. So when we were gathering ideas within our group, when it was clear that there would be a proposal and everyone was asked to chip in their thoughts, most of the sentences I was chipping in started with "do not." Because, as Emma said, we already have an electricity market directive which is paving the way towards a different world, a world where we have more and more renewable energy, which is volatile, where we need backup capacities, where we need more transmission activity also between member states in order to bring prices down, also for those states that are still more reliant on fossil fuels than other ones. And we have to phase out fossil fuels. Please take a look to Italy and Spain to learn why. So basically, my wish to those negotiating would be, take care not to make too strong amendments to a very temporary situation. Do not change long-term things in order to address a short-term crisis. We have to make sure that we have a market that will work for a climate-neutral Europe. And this is the task which we should set ourselves. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Paulus. Signora Toia, prego.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, yes, I support Mr. Casale's work. I think it's very appropriate. And I'd like to stress that I also agree with what he was saying about the revenue of companies and profits. We can't go beyond our task, but certainly we need to have an overall vision which affects the institutions as well, particularly in terms of private economic operators. I think he's done some really good work. One comment which may seem maybe minor, but I think it's important. We've heard the word market mentioned many times, talking about failure, preserving the market, etc., etc. But I would remind everyone that Europe is a social market economy. Social doesn't mean welfare. It also means a role in the economy of social subjects. And so when we're talking about support, because our colleague Carvalho was picking up on that as well, from the Casales report, I would ask on that point our rapporteur, and I'll be making some amendments there, to look at this market. It's not only the major operators, the companies, the purchasers, etc., but there's a space for energy communities as well, and renewables run by cooperatives, etc. So it would be a good idea if that could be introduced as well, precisely because we are a social market economy, even though we tend to forget it quite often. Thank you.
Buzek now.
Thank you very much, Chair. I listened very carefully to all the arguments, especially described by, explained by Mr. Rapporteur. Thank you very much for your great work. But I disagree with one issue, which is very important. Cap on the market revenues, it will negatively affect our energy transformation, I'm quite sure, by endangering so much needed green investments. The energy sector should reinvest its revenues in the energy transition. On the other side, we all agree that our households have to be supported by member states as a part of the social policy. So there are two sides of the same coin, and we should remember about that. Second issue, the Commission shall present a thorough impact assessment of the revised electricity market design, evaluating alternatives to the current wholesale market rules. This may turn out to be crucial for safeguarding competitiveness of our European industry. If I may, to add one information, tonight at 6:30, we've got in our European Parliament, next to a members' restaurant in the hall, open hall, European Energy Forum meeting. Director General Dieter Juhl Jürgensen will discuss with us, members of Parliament, first of all, so you are invited, flexibility solutions in the electricity market design reform. It could be very interesting for all of us. 6:30 this evening, level 0, European Parliament, next to members' restaurant. Thank you very much. And congratulations for Madame Paulus for explaining our market. I agree with you. It is a response. Well, our market is working. Maybe we are not fully satisfied with all the results, but it's just market rule. Very clear. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Mrs. Paulus. I go to Mrs. Solis Perez now.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. I shall speak Spanish. Simply to add a few points to this discussion we've been having so far today. First, on interconnections. We've already spoken about this. It's important to reinforce this. Second, the subject of storage. Important as well. Look at storage problems because of the fact that they're taxed very heavily, taxed twice also. Look at what the Commission has been saying about this. We've got to watch out for this, particularly if we want to roll out renewables. Now, in storage also, dependence on critical raw materials in the supply chains is to be taken into account. And another point that has been considered here, the possibility of energy sharing. I believe, indeed, that this should be made extensible to all consumers, take into account their own physical reality. And a very important point, the increasing liquidity in the time markets, on the time markets, this should not have an influence on the day markets, and we must avoid state intervention in this area. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I go to Mr. Fuchslang now.
Thank you so much. Yes, I would say that I agree very much with both Mrs. Paulus and President Buzek in saying that this is not, this situation that we find ourselves in is not because of a market failure. It's because of bad policy decisions, the lack of a plan, and bad decisions over decades, letting ourselves become way too dependent on Russian energy. And you cannot really blame the market for that. So we have to remember, in order to get out of this situation, maybe fixing the market, so to speak, is not really the right solutions. Rather, we need more investments in renewables and energy efficiency. And so we have to make sure that the work we do here really incentivizes more investments in green transformation, green transition, because that is what we need to get out of this crisis that we're in. And that is to say that we need a stable investment environment. We cannot afford to make it insecure for the investors to invest in the green transition. So that I think is a main priority of this plan. Also, we need more grids, we need more interconnections, so we need to share our energy better. And here I think the rapporteur is on the right track. I think it's very good what is in the report with the 15% connection target. That needs to be prioritized, and that's what I see in the report also. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If Mrs. Niebler would like to intervene on this also. Thank you so much. Then I go, if no other interventions, I go to European Commission. I invite again Madam Director Sikov-Magni to take the floor.
Many thanks, President Buzoi, and many thanks all of you. So I would first want to thank the rapporteur, Mr. González Cáceres, and his team for the hard work on the report and on the market design with very positive engagement. I think we have heard how crucial the reform is so as to bring more stability in electricity prices, accelerate the development and integration of renewables into the system, and to protect consumers while giving them levers to play their role in the energy transition if they so wish. So the draft report contains indeed a number of positive developments, in particular regarding consumer rights and protection related to fixed price contracts, or the provisions related to flexibility solutions, such as the extension of the cross-border intraday market, or more clarification regarding the design principles for two-way contract for difference. But any change, as has been highlighted by many of you, to the electricity market requires careful analysis, and I would like to flag two suggestions here in the draft report that we believe risk to weaken the European well-functioning energy market. So first, the introduction of the inframarginal revenue cap at the level of 180 euro in case of an electricity price crisis as a permanent measure. We see it problematic, and I would like to strongly express our reservation on that point. And the reasons being that on the one side, we cannot predict what the future crisis would look like. It may be very different than the one we see today, and in that case, the solution may not be the right one. And we see many shortcomings related to the very divergent implementation by member states on the existing emergency measure, which has led to investment uncertainty and slowdown of investments in renewables. While we assess the measure in the crisis, we have seen its risk fragmentation of the EU market, investor uncertainty that I already mentioned, and as a consequence, slowdown of investments in renewables that we desperately need. Second, the draft report also changes the triggers for the declaration of an electricity price crisis, which would allow member states to implement below-cost regulated prices for households and SMEs. The consequence is that the Commission would be required to declare an electricity price crisis whenever there was doubling of wholesale prices over the 5-year average. We believe that this could lead to a lot of uncertainty, a lot of situations where the situation would be triggered, and again with consequences for investments in renewables. So these are the two major concerns that the Commission has. In addition, we do have some other issues, but of less importance or less caution. On the forward markets, the draft report delays the decision to implement the virtual hubs by several years. Whilst we do agree that more work is needed for the technical implementation, we would like to see that the direction of travel is set in the regulation already. Regarding PPAs, the draft report proposes to introduce a standardized contract and the platform. Whilst we, in principle, see these as potentially positive elements, we would, however, wish to see first whether there is market appetite for these solutions, because the PPA market in many member states is still not existing, and we should allow it to emerge before regulating further. So many thanks for your attention, and we are certainly keen to continue working with you in order to finalize the Parliament's report. Many thanks.
Thank you so much. I go back to our rapporteur now, please.
I heard this, that we need to prepare for future high prices of energy in times of peace. We have to be very cautious in the wholesale market in times of war, in times of crisis. The fact of the matter is that we need to be ready. I heard very many constructive comments. However, faced with doubt, the message the consumer is getting is prices are going up and we're doing nothing. And we just trust the market to solve things. That won't happen. Simply will not happen. We can't simply say there's a gas price crisis because of the Russian supply problem, when our electricity prices right now are twice what they were before the crisis, because we depend on another gas which is just as expensive. So we must make headway in renewables. And the cap, the inframarginal revenue cap, does not stop investment in renewables. You can have weeks, hours, months in prices over 100 or 200 euros, and you still won't have a price crisis, and technologies could receive that particular remuneration. So what we're ensuring here is remuneration to renewables that should be sufficiently high. And in a price crisis, citizens, and this is a risk we all run in energy and transition times, citizens must realize that renewables also protect them, that renewables are giving them accessible prices, and we can manage to get this only if we introduce measures in order to take emergency action. Because if the idea is to put in more renewables to have more accessible energy and at the same time or fight against climate change, but when there's a fossil fuel crisis, then you're paying for renewables at 300 or 400 times what or 3 times or 4 times what it was before the crisis. Who's protecting what? So first of all, what we need is to push forward renewables, yes, but at the same time, predictability. We have to be predictable. We cannot simply go without the tools that we have not had during this particular crisis. So in a situation of crisis, when prices are out of control, this is something that should be predictable for the market, clearly predictable, and to be predictability is of the essence. And I agree with Mr. Eller that in some areas we cannot rush forward. We're going to have very interesting discussions coming forward. But let's keep in mind this. We need to give trust back to the consumer. Trust that energy transition is good for their pockets as it is for the European industry. Otherwise, we're doomed to fail.
Thank you so much. We are looking forward for a good cooperation between our rapporteur and shadows. Of course, colleagues eager to propose amendments and to participate to the work on this very important legislative file. Just to remind you, colleagues, that the deadline for amendments is today at 5 p.m. So if not yet prepared amendments,